Hi students, welcome back to our discussion on finding answers. This week we are moving on to discuss specialized databases that contain primary sources such as newspaper articles, images of paintings and other artifacts from museums, and websites where you can access data provided by the U.S. government. These databases are valuable and useful in finding and accessing primary sources for your research papers and projects. The objectives for today's lesson are: define what a specialized database is and discuss its role in research, identify the specialized databases that contain primary sources, and distinguish between specialized resources in the library and on the web. Previously, we discussed the information lifecycle, in which information is categorized in three ways: primary sources, meaning first, secondary sources, meaning second, and tertiary sources, meaning third. As you can see from the timeline on this slide, when an event occurs, it is recorded by newspapers or internet news reports, photographs, or first-person accounts of the event, such as letters, or nowadays, posts on social media. These items are considered primary sources because they describe the event as it is happening or just after it occurred. A secondary source is produced weeks or months after the event with in-depth information and analysis, such as a scholarly article. As time passes, the event will appear in an encyclopedia, which gives a brief overview of the event. For this lesson, we are focusing our attention on newspapers, images, and data, all of which are considered to be primary sources. So what are specialized databases? They are library databases which contain digitized objects that are not available in the library's general databases. Some examples are the Los Angeles Times Current Database and ArtStore database. These resources are unique because they allow you to access historic materials in one place. The Los Angeles Times databases, for example, allow you to access articles from 1881 to present. Although you can find images, videos, and data in general library databases like Academic Search Premier, specialized databases only have primary sources. That way you can focus your attention on primary sources and explore. ArtStore, for example, has images of digitized artworks from various museums and archives. On the right is an example of an image from ArtStore. This is a painting from the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Similarly, Kanopy, which is pictured on the left, provides you with documentaries and other streaming videos. You can watch the entire video or segments. And like other databases, these resources provide citations. In the case of ArtStore, you can download images to be used in your research. A word about reusing images on ArtStore. These images are owned by the institutions that are providing us with access to the images. Be careful how you use these images because they are protected by copyright. As long as you're using the images for non-commercial educational purposes, you can download them. But commercial use of the image is prohibited. For information about the use of these images, click on the support link within the database. There's a link to citations and copyright on that page. Let us know if you have any questions about this. So now that we know where to find primary sources, let's discuss how you can use them in your research. Let's start with the definition of a primary source. As we discussed earlier, primary sources are first-hand accounts, that is, records, objects, or data of people, an event, or a series of documents describing a trend, such as Western migration in the United States. What distinguishes a primary source from other sources is that they are created at the time the event occurred. They help us to understand our past by allowing us to revisit an event through the words of the people involved or images or recordings of the time. This makes them exciting to read and analyze, but it also makes them challenging to use. We have to try and interpret their words within the context of the time they occurred and to understand what the artifacts tell us or do not tell us about our shared past. Pay attention to who is included and, more importantly, who is not included or represented. Here are some examples of primary sources. The image on the left is an oil painting of Frida Kahlo from 1940. This painting is available in Art Store and is owned by the University of Texas at Austin. This is an example of a primary source because it is the original painting of Frida Kahlo. There are numerous other examples of primary sources such as letters, photographs, sound and video recordings. Even posts on Instagram or Twitter are considered primary sources because they are reflecting events or trends today. Here are two more examples of primary sources. The image on the left is a newspaper article from the Los Angeles Times about the 1984 Summer Olympics, which were held in Los Angeles. Because this article is more than 30 years old, you will not find it easily on a Google search, and you will have to pay for access to it. However, you can access it through the library's Los Angeles Times historical newspaper database. The other image is a 1934 map of the wine regions of Southern California. It was originally published in Fortune magazine. It is an example of an item you can access by visiting the library's Special Collections and Archives, which is a specialized library within the university library that preserves and makes accessible rare materials. If you would like more information about Special Collections and Archives, you can visit their webpage as shown below the image. Before we begin talking about where to find data, let's talk about what data is. Data is information that is collected or created during research. There are two options for data. The first is data that you create, for example, surveys, interviews, or recording measurements in a lab. And the second is data that has already been collected, for example, by government agencies, think tanks, and academics. Where can you find data? You can find data in lots of places. Scholarly articles and books like the Journal of Hydrology, as shown on the slide, government websites like the Environmental Protection Agency, and nonpartisan organizations like the Pew Research Center. When you read your paper or report, check out the methodology section to find out how they collected their data, and look at the results or conclusions section for the analysis of the data collected. If you locate the data you'd like to reuse, it is a good idea to find the original source of the data so you can evaluate it with your own measures. You want to evaluate the raw data, not someone else's interpretation of the data. Finally, the U.S. Census Bureau is an example of a government agency that collects and makes accessible data about the U.S. population. You can find data on states, counties, cities, or the entire country. It is the go-to source for economic and demographic information about businesses and the U.S. population, respectively. The screenshot on your right is an image of LA County from the U.S. Census Bureau. Let's say you need to find out the demographics of the county. Examples of demographics are age, income, education, and race. Here are some examples of data you can find on this website. 12.9% in the county are 65 years or older, 31.8% have a bachelor's degree or higher, and 439,513 businesses are owned by women. This is one of the many places on the web and in the library we can find data. This concludes this lecture. Have a great day, students.